I call to order the March 18th, 2025 bus contract work session for the Rutherford County School System. First up, we have the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Mr. Caleb Tidwell. To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Instead of a moment of silence, Mr. Vaughn would like to pray for us this evening.
Thank you for this great school system. Its bus drivers were all blessed. Everything we had. Father, I just pray that you guide our decisions, you guide our words, and let it be to the desires of you that you want us to have. And be with us and correct us. In your son Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Next we have the, I'm glad to have everyone back with us now. Next we have the approval of the agenda. Everyone's got a packet in front of them. 2 packets, actually. I'll take a motion. Are we going to?
Just a work session.
Just a work session? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I'm sorry. I got thrown off when it said recommend motion. Next, we have the bus contract discussion. Mr. Reed, rather.
Thank you. Yeah. So, board members, as you know, we've been engaged with the negotiated new bus contract the last several months. The current bus contract, as you know, expires the end of this school year. So it's time to do a new contract with the bus contractors. They've been good partners with the school system for many years, and certainly the schools cannot operate without them. And they provide valuable services to the school system here, and overall the system, the bus system we have, though it may be different than what a lot of counties have, works pretty well, and our kids are generally taken to school on a very safe basis in a timely manner, and certainly we are very thankful to the bus contractors for that. So I want to go through the proposed changes to the bus contract from what we currently have in the contract that's in place today. And I'll hit the major ones of those. If there's something I'm skipping over that you have a question about, let me know. So this will be a proposed 4-year contract. That's what we currently have. So this new contract's being proposed is another 4-year contract that would start July 1st of 2025. And I'm going to go through what you have in front of you is a red line version of the changes that have been made from the existing contract. You'll see the changes in blue and red in the text of the document itself. Most of the comments you see in the column there on the margins are just formatting type comments, so you can ignore those. That's the way Microsoft Word shows those. But the text, the changes themselves are in blue and red in the text of the document. And those are changes from the existing contract that's in place today with the bus contractors. So the purpose of this red line document is to show you what has changed from the contract you have today with the bus contractors. So during the last several weeks, I've met with the Bus Contractors Association and their attorneys. I've met with many other contractors who are not members of that association, and I've had input being fed to me by our own transportation department staff, contractors within the association, and contractors outside the association. We haven't been able to incorporate all the contractors' comments into the contract, nor have I been able to incorporate all the transportation department's comments to the contract. So what I've done is try to accommodate the concerns being raised by both sides in this contract and try to address issues as best they could be addressed. So it'll be in a fair manner to both the transportation department and to the bus contractors. So that's what this contract seeks to do. Let me go through and hit the major changes on the contract. And I'm going to hit this from a 30,000-foot view initially. If you have specific questions about something, please let me know, and we'll go back and address those. I'm going to skip over to page 4, which is number 2.2. And there are some changes in the language here. We're asking the contractors to basically provide a mechanism by which they have a substitute bus available to run their routes if their bus is broken down. So if for some reason they have a mechanical issue, or say they have a bus driver issue, the purpose of this section, this section 2.2, is for some plan to be in place on the front end to cover that. So I think that's something that's beneficial to both the contractors and the school system. We adopted the Contractors Association language for the first part of this section in 2.2. So a lot of this, these changes came from the Bus Contractors Association. We did leave in here language that the Transportation Department requested, basically saying that in the event a contractor's route is covered by somebody else for 12 days or more, then there could be a penalty assessed to those contractors at the rate of $100 per day or $50 per half day. And then if a contractor's route is covered for 20 days or more within an academic year, the board could terminate the contract. What the concern the Transportation Department raised with respect to routes being covered is we've had several instances where maybe one bus was running 2 routes, and as a result of that, it results in students not being picked up on time and teachers having to stay late. So if it doesn't happen with most of our contractors, it's an isolated issue, but it is an issue we face where you think, well, what's the problem if someone provides a substitute bus? What's the problem with having a substitute bus? Should understand that mechanical issues will affect every bus every year at some point. So if a bus is down at some point for some number of days, it's really not a big issue. But if you have a recurrent issue with a bus where it's down, for an extended period of time, someone's not replacing it, not fixing it, not doing something to act responsibly to get it back in service, it does have impacts on the school system. And we have had issues where kids have had to not be picked up on time at school. We had another incident today of that. And we've had issues where teachers had to stay overtime waiting for a bus to show up to pick up kids. So this is not a common problem. It's an isolated problem, but the reason that we have the $100 fine in there is to provide some mechanism to hopefully give those contractors we have the issue with a little bit of a push and motivation to go ahead and try to get their buses repaired and get those things covered.
Mr. Reed.
Madam Chair.
Yes, yep, Ms. Darby first, and then I'll go to Ms. Rosales.
Mr. Reed or Dr. Sullivan, I'm not sure who would be better. Is it possible to get some data on that?
Yeah.
As far as like, how often is that happening? How often is it the same bus? Some statistics, so we can kind of see like throughout the school year what that's been looking like?
We can start collecting some, I think. Yeah, it's not something we collect normally, but if you want, we can get our principals to start collecting.
I think it'd just be a good idea
Yeah.
to have
Like
a
for
good
a couple
understanding of
weeks.
how
Yeah, just
often
for a
it's
couple weeks,
happening.
yep. And you're gonna notice it is the same contractors, the same bus. It's by and large not the majority of our contractors.
Ms.
Do you
Rosales.
agree with that, Mr. Lee?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Ms. Rosales.
Yes, okay, so I had a bus contractor ask a question in regards to this, and then I spoke with Trey Lee about this. So just for clarification's sake, even though it says, the language says substitute bus, that's where the confusion was, that Trey Lee, when I spoke to him, he was saying that this is more about having a plan in the event that something were to happen, there is a backup plan, not necessarily that there is a bus, that they have to get a second bus, is
Now, a
just to
spare
have a
bus is
plan.
not required.
Right.
This does not require a spare bus. Some of the bus companies, the bus sales companies in town actually have buses people can rent if they need a bus. Okay, all right. But the bus contractors generally work it out among themselves. They've not been an issue usually about obtaining substitute buses.
But it doesn't require a
There's no
spare
spare
bus.
buses.
It's just
A
a
contractor is
plan.
not required to buy a spare bus.
Right, but we are requiring the bus, if this were to go into, if this is the contract of the way it states that, we're requiring the bus contractors to provide a plan in the event that a bus were to go down.
Correct.
Yes, that's what this is about. I just wanted the clarification.
Just a moment, Mr. Tidwell, Ms. Sharp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Reed, is there a caveat for our bus drivers in the event that there's a part or something that delays them really getting repaired? Because this is pretty general.
This is general, it doesn't say shall, it says may be assessed a penalty. So if there's a valid reason that a bus has been out of service for 12 or more days, the Transportation Department can hear that reason and may not assess this penalty.
Mr. Tidwell?
Pretty close, same question, but maybe a different phrase. I'm just trying to play this out in my head. So say you have a contractor who has an issue with their bus and they have to put it into the shop. Who is deciding as far as these 12 days or these 20 days as to what's counted against the contractors? The contractor just reaches out to transportation and says, hey, my bus is down, y'all need to find somebody to cover it? Or if let's say that same bus contractor whose bus is down has someone that has the availability, or they have someone else they know has a spare bus, and they cover the route, are they still going to get docked for these 12 days or 20 days because their original bus is not running, or as long as the plan's in effect, we're good?
It's discretionary, so I think it leaves it open, so there's some discretion left with the Transportation Department here in regards to it. I think if a route is being run and you have a substitute bus that covers that route in a timely manner, I don't see that there's any reason to assess a penalty. But if there is someone's bus is not running, as a result of that bus not running, you're having kids not picked up on time or teachers staying late, in those situations, it seems to be appropriate to assess a penalty. So there's some flexibility in the language we have here with regard to that, but it's allowing the Transportation Department to determine what instances should be appropriate for assessing this penalty.
All right, so I'm going to give you another example because I think this is one that did happen. So you had a bus that took on an extra route in which their route, they were not finished with their first route before the time they needed to be at the second route. So what it ended up being is you end up having this bus being late consistently. They would lose that second route if they violated this for, say, more than 12 days. They continue to do this over and over.
Well, if someone's bus is, if you have a bus substituted for 12 days or more, then you first get the fine. And then if that happens for 20 days or more in a school year, then this does constitute grounds that the contract could be potentially terminated.
Yeah, depending on if there's some extenuating circumstances that would obviously allow the flexibility. Okay. That clears up a little bit.
Okay, Dr. Sullivan?
Yeah, so because the other side of that, then we're violating employees' contracts because we're having employees have to stay after. Again, it is a very small group of contractors. I emailed the board one today, and that is one that was an issue when I was the principal of that school that is still going on, and that contractor is still getting paid to run those routes, even though they're not running those routes. So that's the issue when we need some type of mechanism, and from a director's stance, I don't care what the mechanism is, but when somebody is not running the route, we are still sending funding like that route is getting run, and it's getting run causing us to have to go back and have the school stay and violate their contracts. So you have different contracts being violated to accommodate somebody not doing what they're not following.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Darby?
I'm sorry, I was just processing what I had asked for before. So we don't have any way of tracking currently what buses have run late and how many times throughout a school year they have run late?
Outside of the principal just making sure that we have it if they contact the transportation department and say this bus is going to be down. We have that, but as far as a bus just showing up late, they just show up 5-7 minutes late. That's just what the principal deals with on a day-to-day basis. But if it's something where the bus is truly down, then they're supposed to, as part of their contract, contact transportation.
So the data that you would be able to get us would only be on a bus that's actually
Correct.
not
Yep.
currently doing its route, not necessarily ones that are
Yep.
habitually showing up late.
Trey, is that correct?
We've got a good idea.
Do you? Okay.
I mean, don't get me
principals
wrong.
complain enough?
We don't have staff to track things like that, but we do have the abilities to track the habituals. But It's the same frequent flyers. It's not hard. I can get you the information.
Because the GPS would tell you what time they show, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Anyone else? Okay.
We move on to page 6.
We can stay on page 5 if y'all want to.
Page 6 is where we talk about insurance, and there's been a fair amount of discussion about this already. As you know, state law has changed. Historically, the school system, the Board of Education has insured the bus contractors for their transportation services for the school system. So when they were running their routes for the school system purposes, that was covered by the county's insurance program. By virtue of a change in state law last year, that's no longer allowed. The current law requires bus contractors to obtain their own liability insurance. I have heard today there's some bill maybe introduced in the House where that may change that. I haven't seen the bill today, so this law may change depending on what the new bill is, if it gets passed by the Senate as well and gets signed. But under the current law, contractors are required to carry their own bus liability insurance. So this change on the bottom of page 6 under G is reflective of that requirement from the state legislature that contractors maintain their own liability insurance. And what I have proposed that the type of insurance they carry is auto liability insurance with limits of no less than $1 million, business liability of no less than $1 million, and then an umbrella policy of $2 million on top of those two coverages. That provides insurance in the total amount of $3 million in case an accident occurs. Of course, our society is a lot more litigious today than it was 10 years ago or 15 years ago. We will have bus accidents happen. We have them every year. So we will have accidents every year. And having $1 million of coverage alone without an umbrella probably is insufficient these days. It's not good business practice to only have $1 million of coverage today because it's going to leave someone uninsured at that point. So the cost of the umbrella policy on top of the basic policy is only a few $100s. It's not that much more to get the additional $2 million of coverage on top of the $1 million coverage. So I propose that we get $1 million limits for auto collision, $1 million limits for business liability, and then a $2 million policy on top of it. The language here does require the school system to be named additional insured. There's a statute pending in the state legislature to require that by law. That is not required today by law. It's good business practice for the school system to be named additional insured, because what happens when a bus accident occurs, this lawyer who sues on behalf of whoever is going to be injured is going to sue everyone possible that they can sue as a result of that injury. It's going to be the bus owner, the bus driver, and the school system. So we're all three are going to get sued. And there needs to be one common insurance policy there to defend all of us in one action. So we're not sitting there pointing fingers at each other, blaming somebody else for causing the accident. So, and then maybe there not being sufficient coverage for one of the parties who's being sued in such an instance. So I have proposed the additional insured language for that reason. That's what most businesses would have. That's typical for most businesses who hire transportation services. And that has actually now been proposed in the state legislature. So while that's not in the law today, that is in a bill today that is going through the legislative session now, that school systems be named as additional insureds under the policy. So we have that requirement in here. I think the Bus Contractors Association may have some objection to the umbrella insurance, and they can talk about what they think about the insurance situation. But in today's world, with a bus transporting all the kids and all the cars on the road today, for a business to operate, you should have a minimum amount of coverage of $3 million. That's not an excessive amount of coverage. When I first wrote this contract, I required 5. I brought it down to 3 because I got some insurance quotes and to try to get the insurance quotes at a manageable level. So for the $4,000 that we are proposing to pay for the insurance premiums in the contract, that would pay for the type of coverages we have here. So that $4,000 would cover the $1 million auto liability, the $1 million business liability, and the $2 million umbrella. So those costs will be absorbed in the contract.
Okay, Mr. Vaught and then Ms. Sharp.
Jeff, question, where is it, how much insurance do we have now? What's the county got?
Well, self-insured for the first $350,000, and then we have excess coverage after that. So we're self-insured as a county
Right,
up to the first $350,000. So we're paying that out of pocket
correct.
ourselves, the county. If it goes over that, we have excess carriers that kick it at that point,
What is the excess?
up to $10 million.
It's 10 million. I couldn't remember, I'd asked Ed that, and I couldn't remember. Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Sharp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you give us any of the bills that are related to the insurance? Any of the bill numbers, House bills, Senate bills?
I don't have the bill numbers.
Does anybody
I
have
can
them?
email those to you, but I don't have them with me.
I can find it real quick.
That'd be good.
Yes, Mr. Tidwell.
I know we haven't got really to the financial part, but this is the insurance. You'd include, I think, $4,000. Is that per bus or per route? So for instance,
I have it per route right now. I know some of the bus contractors have spare buses, and they want to have their spare buses covered as well. So the language I have in here now is by route. If the board wants to insure the spare buses as well, we would have to put some language in here to cover spare buses.
let me ask you a follow-up question to that. So some buses run multiple routes a day. So would that be an additional funds going toward the same bus, the same insurance?
It should be it should be paid, $4,000 should be the amount paid for one bus.
Okay, so is this by bus or by route?
The language I have here says route.
We would need to change it.
So, yeah.
We
So
would
if we may
change
need
it.
to change that language, if you got buses running more than one route.
Yep.
But that's
Okay.
paid, $4,000 is paid on an annual basis.
Yes, yeah, I got that.
It's not
Good.
paid monthly.
Good catch, Mr. Tidwell.
Madam
Ms. Darby?
Chair. Along Mr. Tidwell's thought, is my understanding of what you're trying to say, it would be per bus per year, and that if they have a spare bus that they use in case one of their buses goes down, that's what you mean when some of them are saying they would like those buses covered as well,
Correct.
correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Of course, we don't require people to have a spare bus, so it's optional for a bus contractor to obtain it, to have a.
So the way you're anticipating this to go right now is $4,000 per regular bus that is used?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
That's the language in here currently.
Well, no, you said it says route currently,
Well, that's correct, yes.
but the intention is one
Per
bus
that's used, yes.
that is used on a regular basis. Okay.
Yes, Mr.
Would the insurance policies, if they did have a spare bus, would that not be like me having a car and then maybe purchasing a new one and calling the insurance company and saying, hey, I'm going to be using this today? Could they, instead of just absolutely having to have another policy for that spare
I
bus?
think the business liability policy would probably would probably cover a spare bus. The auto collision is based on a specific VIN number of the bus, so that would be just specific.
Would they be able to call, and let's just say, they know something's coming up, they've ordered a part, and the bus is going to be incapacitated. Could they not then put that on the second bus?
If they had time to do it and to get their agent to make that change in time, then possibly yes. I don't know that they would have time to do that, though, because they'd have to contact the agent would have to contact the carrier and get all the paperwork changed for one day. So I don't know that's really feasible.
And
So-
the Transportation Department would have to have a copy of it to fulfill the law. The law says we have to have a copy of the insurance.
Yeah.
So if they want to do that, and I'm not saying, and I'm not getting into this at all, I'm just saying if somebody wanted to do that, we would have to have a copy of that insurance. And it would have to probably be specific to that VIN number.
Anything else?
So that's the language that's in the insurance, and
Bill number.
Yeah, Dr. Sullivan has the bills.
The only one that I can find is House Bill 0534 and Senate Bill 0408. The combination of those two. So House Bill 0534 by Rudder and Slater, and then Senate Bill 0408 by Bailey. The only ones that It's the ones that addresses the tort liability portion.
Can you say that one more time? Sorry.
Yeah, House Bill 0534 by Rudder and Slater, and then Senate Bill 0408 by Bailey. It's the one that addresses tort liability and prohibits governmental entities and local boards of education, so it's that one. I'm getting some nods, so I think it's that one.
Okay, so that's what we have, the language we have in insurance right now. So moving on to, there's some minor changes, and moving on to page 9, there's, I guess this came from some of the contractors. They want to make sure animals are not allowed on the bus, so we have added language to not allow animals on the bus unless they're required in the terms of an IEP or for some special education student. Most of our people who have, if they are blind, have dogs, they will ride special ed buses. They won't be on general ed bus. But we've added language under I to prohibit animals on buses. And I'm going to go on to page 10 on capacity, because we've had a lot of discussion about this, what size buses we should have. The language that I have plugged in here now allows for 78 passenger buses or more. As you know, it has been a historic requirement of the school system to require a minimum seat size capacity of minimum of 90 passenger buses. And the reason the school systems require that gives you a uniform bus that you can use throughout the school system. You can move it from route to route. You can change your routes up, and you know that you have a bus of a sufficient size to handle the students on that route. You've heard a lot of discussion about there are some bus contractors who would want the option of using a smaller bus. They say there are not that many 90-passenger buses manufactured. They're not able to negotiate prices that well. They can get a cheaper price for a used 78-passenger bus or 84-passenger bus than they can a 90-passenger bus. So the language I have in, and this is for the board to determine what you want to do on this, but right now the language I have in here allows for 78-passenger buses or more. I have put language in here saying that for any route less than where a bus that's smaller than 90 is used, that has to be a route approved in advance by the transportation department. So it's not going to be something generally around the county unless the transportation department specifically approves a route to be used by a 78 or 84 passenger bus. It also says that if someone buys a 78 or 84 passenger bus, they realize there may be more changes to their route than there would have been if it was a 90-passenger bus. Because if you are operating a bus with a 78 passengers capacity and you have a new subdivision come on your route, one or two subdivisions, it could become a 90-person route. So that may cause you to have to move your bus to a different route or even lose that route. So I have language in here by which if a contractor chooses to go with that option, I do provide them that option, but it just tells them they do have some risk associated with that because we can't guarantee that route will be a 78-passenger route. So that's the language I have in here right now. So,
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Tidwell.
If obviously the risk associated with making a decision like this will fall back on the contractor. So there have been several that have asked for this as an option, and if they choose to do this, then that's on them to decide. My request is if we are going to keep this language in here, that we give some kind of a certain amount of notice, like 45-day notice, maybe 60-day notice, to let them know that route is changing because of new subdivision or whatever else, so that they have a little bit of a heads up to make that decision. But there's risk here. It's just they have to know it.
Yeah.
I concur. I think they need to know. They need to know the number of houses going in and the number of children that could be impacted.
Yeah, I think we can find some notice provision to add to it.
Thank you.
So that's so I don't know where the board is as a body as a whole. I know the transportation department would rather just have 90-passenger buses because that's what they're used to dealing with, and they went to that for a reason, to make uniform buses throughout the county. It allows them to adjust their routes more easily and know what capacity buses they have running where.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Ms. Darby.
Mr. Reed, B underneath there, I'm just asking because I don't know that change in the sped bus size. is that going to affect any of our current buses?
I understand, so sped buses are now anywhere from 22 to 34 buses.
Or is it just increasing, giving them the option to increase? It doesn't have to be 34.
I think this is consistent with what we have today. And the old contract said 31, you probably should have said 34.
Or, Mr. Carter has a,
to you guys, and y'all had to approve for us to get paid for the 34 passenger bus. Now it just makes it so I buy a 34 passenger bus, I put it on the road, I get paid for the 34 passenger bus. Thank you. That's all, that's clarifying that so that we can take that extra step of you have to approve that bus, but y'all just did that for me a couple, 6, 8 weeks ago. That came on your agenda, y'all had to approve because I needed to get paid for that bus. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's, so the bus size is something for the board to consider. So this version of the contract does allow for 78 passenger buses and larger. I'm going to skip on over to page 11. And B3, there have been some discussion with some of the bus contractors about this. We added a provision that some of the bus contractors request that they be allowed to record, that they be allowed to view the recordings on their buses quickly after if they have an incident on a bus, because some of them thought that there was too long of a delay in being able to access the videos at the central office. So we have language in here now to allow bus contractors to view the recording on buses during normal business hours within 2 business days of the written request for it. So that was something added at some of the bus contractors' requests.
Mr. Reed, if that's something the board needs to do, we will need to add a staff member. If that's something the board entails, we will need to add a staff member. We discussed that at the retreat, so just know that'll have a budgetary, we just don't have the staff to do that.
in addition to the one that we talked about at the retreat?
Yeah, for sure. If we're within 2 business days, yes. That was I didn't know that. Did you, Trey? Yeah.
I missed that.
Yeah.
I would have asked for the other.
Yeah.
And it's based on the number of video requests we get a day now. I mean, it's 45 or 50 a day. And typically, we get them fairly quickly, but, and I'm fine. You know, you want 2 days?
I denied.
I'll do it.
Yeah. I denied his new position request just by moving him up, but this would be one that I would go back and grant.
So, Mr. Lee, how often are the contractors requesting to see video? I know we talked about parents.
It varies on the day, but out of 40 a day, probably 8 to 10 of them are contractors, 8 to 10 are principals, parents, our esteemed attorney from subpoenas, things like that.
You're saying roughly about a quarter of the requests are coming from the contractors?
2 weeks before spring break, about 120 a day. I'm not joking. Well, maybe not joking. I mean, it's high right now.
Well, I know, but I was trying
Kids lose their
to
mind.
differentiate between how many are being requested by contractors and how many
Yeah.
are to request by general.
Well, we need to change the 2 business days to another day from a school system standpoint, we can do that. I did not think the 2 business days would be that burdensome, really.
Yeah.
Because I didn't think we had that many requests from bus contractors. We made it more than I
That
expected.
problem used to be more pronounced before we had the
The drive, yeah.
direct
3
access
would be
system,
helpful.
where we had to go pull the hard drives.
Yeah.
It's a little more efficient now, because a lot of drivers just call in and say, stamp my video at this time, and I'll be by tomorrow to look at it.
You think we could get it done in 3?
I think I'm fine with 2. Most of the things they're looking for, and I'm speaking for the contractors now, they've got a seat torn. That's their biggest thing right now, and that's why we got to the point of, I got tired of find the kid, go the principal, parents pay, not pay. We were, 2 weeks in before and that's why we do what we do now, is go down to the bus place and get a receipt, and get it fixed and be done with it. And then we go with the children later. But that's the majority of their stuff is vandalism. And the vast majority of those we can get. It just depends on the day. There's days that I can have it for them that afternoon, and there's days that it may take 2 or 3 days.
Instead of a position, if we put 3, I think that gives us, without having to add.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Carter.
I literally just had a bus that was vandalized 2 weeks ago. And due to poor camera placement, they can't see who did it. And I was told that you were not fixing my seat.
I told them when I heard it to send you to get it fixed.
And I was told today that y'all still weren't fixing it. That was my email.
Who
today.
told you that?
Kyle.
I'll take care of that in the morning.
That was quick. Anybody else?
I'll go on the record right now so that everybody sitting here can listen. If a bus contractor has a damaged seat and we can verify when it was tore, you find out it's tore today. When you get through with your route, you report it to transportation, you go to Mid-South, you let them look at it, they will send us an estimate, and I have a blanket purchase order to satisfy my esteemed colleague who's left, and you can get it fixed that day. Do what? I have one place.
Yeah, it's only Mid-South.
That's news to me. That's the first time I've heard that. So we will work on that. I can work on that. I have not, that issue has not been brought to my attention. We can solve that problem too.
Yes, Mr. Vaught.
Trey, so generally speaking, the school system's gonna replace the seat, right?
We're going to fix the damage, which typically that's a new seat cover, yes.
Right. So, all right, so the next part of the question is, how many a week, a day, a month do we have? And I know that varies. Just guessing off the top of your head.
It's 1 or 2 a week.
All right. I'm just thinking, should we look for a private vendor to do house calls and get out of that? I'm just thinking because, and here's the because. Whichever one of those 2 dealerships it is, we're asking them to take a lot of time to transport their bus, to get it fixed.
I used to be allowed to pay them to fix their own.
Right.
Our county will not allow us to do that.
That's a state thing. Yeah, that's a state thing.
So
I'm trying
this is the most expedient way. I'm not aware of a mobile seat covering
I'm just thinking
place.
out loud, something that would take care of the courthouse.
If there's a mobile seat covering person out there that wants to do buses, Thomas and Bluebird, if they'll get to us and get us a price and it's comparable with them, we'll be glad to use it.
You see what I'm saying? That there's got to be a quicker way, maybe a better way that we could do it that would satisfy. And I know we're
Love
trying
to find them.
I think you may just have, but we've got some people who are interested in going in business over here.
You got to have a business like I got
Right.
to deal with the courthouse.
Yeah.
It's not y'all.
Yeah, it's
I
the
like the way
courthouse.
we
Yeah.
did it before. Courthouse said no, I can't do it.
Yeah, we have none of that anywhere. It wasn't just bus contractors, it was hardware, it was everything.
Oh, it's a lot of that. Lisa Nolan taught me those rules. So anyway, all right. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Tidwell.
since there's a lot of individuals here that might know how to resolve that issue, there certainly could be an opportunity there. Just saying.
Okay, I'm going to go on to page 13. We have a lot to cover here. And then let me, this was a lot of comments from bus contractors. Several of them made this comment. So I was going to highlight this to the board under 2.6C. We have previously required 2 transportation meetings a year. The contract at least provided for that. That's not what has been occurring. But there's been a lot of suggestions from bus contractors to change it to 1 transportation meeting a year. So we have done that. So we made the change that the contractors requested. The contractors also did not like the day, the month. There was a lot of issues with the day of the month, the meetings previously being held on. So to compromise between what they have requested and what Transportation Department has requested, we have proposed that the transportation meeting occur on the fourth Thursday in July. So we're thinking that's going to be a week before school starts. Everyone should be back from their summer vacations or in the mode of getting back from their summer vacations and getting ready for the school year. And we still have availability in space for that week. If you go into August, that's when school system staffs come back to school. We have a limited availability for space, and people are really tied up into getting ready for school at that point in August. So we are proposing that the one transportation meeting each year be moved to the fourth Thursday in July. So that's language we put in here at the request of the bus contractors. SPED people will still have 2 meetings because there's some additional duties they have. So if you're a SPED bus driver, you will still have 2 meetings a year.
Mr. Reed,
Yeah, that was something we talked about. We looked at the August meeting date. For us, the August meeting date, we tried to meet somewhere in the middle. If we meet in August, then our transportation staff isn't available to discuss things because we're trying to finalize routes. From a school systems perspective, we're also trying to make sure that routes and student information is being entered into time to be able to meet that 7-day period to get somewhat of a roster available. Trying to do that fourth Thursday was somewhere in the middle. I know it's not perfect. The fourth Thursday is not perfect for us early either because we needed it earlier. So I know that doesn't work for everybody, but it's trying to meet in the middle. So that's where that date came from.
Yeah. So moving on to section 2.7, this is the fine section, which is new to the contract. There's been a lot of discussion about this. Of course, the reason that this section here is limited to very few contractors, this is a handful of contractors that cause the need for this to even be there, because 95% of our contractors don't cause any issues along these lines. But Section 2.7 basically implements a fine structure. This came from something that Hamilton County used in their bus contract. That's the origin of this. It provides for several warnings before a fine could be charged to a bus contractor. First, there's a verbal warning requirement. Secondly, there's a second written warning, which is a written warning. There's a third requirement for a performance infraction meeting with the transportation manager and the transportation department. So there's 3 chances a contractor would have before the fine could even be implemented if a fine was determined to be applicable. So what I have added in addition at the request of some contractors is a more extensive review process. So in the event a contractor believes they have been wrongly assessed a fine, they have the right to appeal that first to the director of schools or the director of schools designee. If that's not resolved at that level, there is a new board created by this contract, which I call the Transportation Contractors Review Board, and that is composed of 3 individuals. That is a board member or other person appointed by the chairman of the board, a staff person outside of the transportation department appointed by the director, and the board attorney. So this new board, which we call the TCRB board, will be 3 people, one of which is appointed by the director of schools outside of the transportation department, one of which was appointed by the chairman of the board and the board attorney to review any assessments of fines under this mechanism, this process here. So that provides you someone outside the transportation department to review any proposed fines that are being assessed. So you're then getting kind of 2 levels of review. You have one from the director of schools initially, and you have a second layer with respect to this body outside the transportation department to determine whether or not a fine was appropriately implemented or not. So we think that gives a fair amount of protection to bus contractors. So if someone feels like they're unfairly being treated, they would have 2 mechanisms to appeal that. So that is what's being proposed with respect to the fines. Are there any questions with respect to the fine
Ms.
structure?
Maxwell?
Yes, Ms. Rosales.
Thank you. So if this new board comes with whatever recommendation, is that recommendation going to be presented by the board? I mean, to the board and for us to approve it, or is it just whatever this
goes to
committee?
the committee approves it. This right
Okay.
here, right now, it sets up for the committee to approve it.
So if the bus contractor doesn't agree with the recommendation of the board, is there an appeal, or there's not going to be an appeal to that decision that's going to
I
come?
currently don't have that coming back to the board. I don't know how many we will have. If the board wants to entertain those, we can potentially have them do that, but right now, I don't have that built into this.
Okay, I was just asking what that meant by having this board committee.
Yeah. So, so that's, and, you know, again, I don't think this will be used very often. I think it would affect only a very few handful of contractors, as it'll be those that we have recurring issues with. So, and the fine structure is not mandatory, it's discretionary with the Transportation Department, but it's meant to provide the Transportation Department an additional tool should they need to use it to help motivate a contractor to do what the contract says they're supposed to be doing. So that's the purpose of this provision.
What's the mechanism now? I mean, non-renewal, right? If somebody is constantly, this looks like a troublemaker. This looks like little Johnny. Don't do that, little Johnny. Don't do that, little Johnny. Don't do that. And the only mechanism you have in place right now is non-renewal. Would that be
Every
it?
4 years.
We don't have the ability to terminate a
We
contract.
do. It has to come to you to terminate.
So this is basically putting a mechanism in place to keep you from having to bring it to us and us making a decision.
That's my hoping, is to spur them along, time out, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
so that I don't have to go those steps, because,
What's the timeline
Depending
right
on
now
what
of
it
how
is.
long it takes?
sir,
What's the timeline of how long that
well,
takes?
it's 30 days before we can really do anything, but if the contractor gets, and I'm going to pick something, let's say their bus is not running, they're not covering the route or whatever.
Yeah.
And they start on day 28, then they can start, they go 5 or 6, 7 days, then their bus is out again for another 30 days. And I'm just making up there's probably 2 to 3 times a year this would come into play.
And the reason I say that, and forgive me for looking at it this way, but a contract's a contract in my view. If somebody's contracted with me to provide a certain service or a certain product, they show up, they don't do it, they've breached the contract, in my opinion. Now that's for him to decide, and I guess if you didn't renew a contract or you terminated, I guess that's what we're really talking about, is terminating a contract in the middle of the school year, right?
Yes, sir.
It's kind of putting that mechanism in place. But I don't know that I'm not hard and fast about that. I don't know that I mean, I appreciate this, but if you come to me and say, this guy, hey, the bus broke down, they won't do anything about it, they don't have a backup plan, out the door. It's pretty simple. I mean, my whole life, guys, is based off contracts.
I'm loving your way of doing business.
I mean, and I'm going to say this. I give these people a lot of credit. They're small business people, owners. They ought to be mature enough. I don't want to have to babysit them. If I'm going to babysit them, I'm going to find somebody else to do it. Really, I mean, that's kind of the way I look at it. But am I out of line right here? No. Okay. I'm just thinking, is somebody else, surely the rest of y'all kind of think this way. I mean, you have the ability to non-renew a teacher that does a bad job, right? So non-renew a contract, and I'm going to pick on Mo because she's my neighbor out there. If Mo doesn't show up to haul her kids, I love you to death. We've grown up together. You're out, right? So I feel like the only reason I bring this up, we all, anytime you get in these type of negotiations, it always seems like you try to accommodate every little issue that there is out there. And I don't think you never do it. There's got to be, in my view, a little bit of handshake, agreement, honor, loyalty, just maturity in this whole thing. And that's, I mean, if you really think we need it, I guess okay, but I don't think we need it at all. That's my...
You give me the opportunity to come in here and legitimately act like business people, I'm fine. Take it out.
Mr.
Yes.
Yeah, and then Ms. Darby, please.
We've had situations previously where we've tried to terminate contracts that did not happen before the board. I think that's where some of the request comes in.
They didn't have,
Yes.
didn't get sued?
No.
Yes, Ms. Darby.
I guess my question is, if you go the route of more of a plain and simple situation, what happens with a contractor that has multiple routes and/or buses? Because it could be that it's one bus or one route that's the issue and not,
We've had contractors that turn in individual routes. So to me, it would be on a case-by-case basis. They're able to turn in routes, then I wouldn't want, if they got, I'm not going to try and get multiple routes unless they're failing at all multiple routes. If they're failing at the multiple routes, I need all of them. But if it's just one, I'm not going to
you
go,
would just
I'm
be
not
talking
asking
about
for the
pulling
others,
that
no.
route specifically, not.
They're a route by route by route thing as far as I'm concerned. Because each route is a separate contract. So I would look at them as individual contracts. You may have 6 of them or 10 if you only got one that's a problem. And there again, I'm going to say this. 1 or 2 times a year, maybe. But there was no mechanism in place to do anything, to spur them along. But if you want to go this route, I'm in.
Mr. Tidwell had some comments.
Yeah, I think this, because it is rare, but we have had a situation before where a contractor, there's some actions that required more immediate action, so we then called a special called meeting because we couldn't wait until the next meeting, which was another 2 weeks away. So this kind of puts in that little extra barrier, which we have done this in different things, like the discipline hearings. We've given some direction to the director to make a wise decision, and that's worked out much better for us in general. So I think it just adds a small touch there, not necessarily this is going to be a reoccurring theme throughout.
Yes, Ms. Rosales.
Thank you. Okay, so I just want education here. All right, so let's, hypothetically, we didn't have, if we were to go with what Mr. Vaught is saying, that a contract is a contract, if they're violating, then that's a causes of termination. So right now, if there's a contract that, a bus ride that is not being served, and they're violating, and then wait till, I don't know, day number 28 to fix it, but then 6 days later it breaks, and then they start all over again with a clock of 30 days. So I guess the question would be then, if it's a repeated pattern, how do we determine when to bring it before the board at that point to say they're out of compliance? Like, how many times do we allow this to happen in a repeated pattern to say enough is enough, your violation, bring it before?
The way I'm going to do it now, instead of allowing the multiple infractions, we're going to try and work out the first one. On the second one, I'm coming to you.
Okay. So if we do away with this piece, we're giving them a grace period of once. If it's a repeat.
I mean, that would be my standard of business. I would like to be given the opportunity to fix my problem, you know, and it would be a sit-down conversation. It's not going to be a sneak attack, but we sit down, have a conversation, and you're not working out. These are, you know, the things that we'd like to see, and which is, we kind of do that now anyway. And then it would be the, you know, the second time, if it's not getting any better, I don't have time.
So then it will be brought before us
I would be
At that
coming to you with a request to terminate the contract.
on the grounds of what?
And you would have the grounds and the reasons for it.
3 strikes and you're out.
Gone. See you later, bye.
Okay.
Ms. Sharp.
I really think that that's fair to our bus drivers who day in and day out get the job done.
Don't disagree.
Okay.
And the other, now I got to follow this back up. This looks like something you would do with an employee, right? And that's my concern. Are we overstepping from a contractual standpoint? You're treating them like an employee, and that's what makes me most uncomfortable about it.
I'm going to move on, if there's no more discussion on that point. I'm going to highlight this one on page 19, 3.3, because this came at the request of several of the contractors. they were requesting a prohibition of food and drinks on the buses. So this is a change, so that would be new in the school system. It said there would be a prohibition of all glass, food and drink on buses, except for lunches and lunch boxes and other containers to be consumed at school and not on the bus, and water. So kids will be allowed to bring water on the bus and their lunch and lunch boxes on the bus, but cannot bring other food and drinks on the bus under this proposed provision.
I think, Mr. Reed, one thing that we need to clarify, we have some students that are on our free and reduced program and stipends, and they get things on Fridays to take home for the weekends and for holidays. So we need to make sure that they get to take those home as well.
Yeah, 'cause
I can add that. I do have an exclusion here for kids who have medical reasons for carrying food, such as diabetic kids, or if a child's on an IEP that requires them to have some kind of food mechanism or drink available to them. And we'll add that additional exception for people on the free and reduced with respect to meals that they take home.
yeah, 'cause it'll be either a sack lunch or in a plastic bag. Not gonna be on a lunchbox.
How bad was
Yeah, well,
the
it's just to make sure that it's specified.
bags of chips, Coke, that kind of thing?
Like candy, wrappers.
Our problem is just
gum.
like it is in the classrooms. Some people allow it, and then when some people allow it, it's just
Yeah.
But
no way I can do it. Yep. Yep. Yeah, they all, yep. And even though it's in the contract, we all know some people are going to allow it.
What will happen if the child does bring food that they're not supposed to have at the bus, and they eat it, consume it, and throw the wrapper on the floor?
Write it up. Yep. Write it
So
up.
what do they do? I mean, what will be the repercussions at that point? Because if we have this here in the contract that they're going to abide by it, but then the kids are not buying by it at all, and they also throw wrappers, so what is the repercussions for this? What is the penalty for the students that are bringing? If we're adding this to the contract, I just want.
Yeah, will it follow them to school?
consequences.
That would be,
Ultimately, a student code.
this would need to be put in the student handbook, I would think.
Okay. Yeah.
Agree.
Right, but if the contract, if the handbook says do not eat, then what are the consequences for that? Because if they're saying that the schools are not doing anything, and we've got this here, it's just going to become a problem.
It's
always
got to
gonna-
be put
it's
in
always
the
gonna become
student
a problem.
handbook. It's got to be in the handbook too.
Yes, I've got you. Yes, Mr. Tidwell.
You'll never solve it.
I think what Ms. Rosales is alluding to is who's going to enforce the consequences. And if it's in the handbook, my understanding would be the principal. So it'd just be like any other discipline issue. But that was a good question.
Yes, Ms. Darby.
I think my concern with that in general is, and we discussed this a little bit at the retreat, sorry. If we're going to put this in policy or even put it in the handbook, it's going to mean absolutely nothing if we're not willing to not allow students to ride buses when they consistently break rules. And I understand the whole attendance, all of that stuff, but it leaves us in this place of, I think to your point, Ms.
Yeah.
Rosales, why put this in here if we're not going to do anything with it? It makes it arbitrary, it's pointless. So unless Rutherford County decides, in spite of getting dinged, for lack of a better term, for absence, if those kids end up not coming to school when they don't ride the bus, all of this stuff it doesn't mean anything, it doesn't hold any weight. And I would love to get some of our legislators and stuff to get behind maybe taking another look at another way to address the absentee issue. It's tying our hands discipline-wise, which makes things difficult on our teachers, difficult on our bus contractors. But putting this here, for me at this point, and putting it in the handbook isn't going to mean anything if we as a district are not going to follow through with a consequence.
That was the point I was trying to make.
And it comes
Bring
back on
up that
parents
we're
as
putting
well.
it in if
Yeah,
it's not-
I said,
Dr. Sullivan.
and I'll add, you have bus contractors who aren't going to enforce it as well. I mean, it's across the board. Yep. So,
Yeah, but if we're going to put it in here and we're going to do a handbook, then there should be something, and if we add teeth to it and the bus contractors don't do anything, then that's on them. because we've got teeth to it. But if there's no teeth, then it's just a hard thing to follow through and implement and enforce. All of the above.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Tidwell.
All right, Trey, can you speak to this? Because we started addressing these discipline issues. I got a lot of calls from bus contractors when I was on the bus committee where there is a breakdown in communication between whether or not a form, we'd had a carbon copy at some point, whether a form was handed, whether the principal said they weren't made aware of the situation, nothing was done, this was a repeat offender, the principal would say they didn't turn in the paperwork, the bus contract. We've resolved some of that with the new system, is that correct? Or we're moving toward that system?
The system is in place, and there's a way to track when that infraction was entered and when it is resolved. I think the difference of opinion is on what that resolve is.
Yeah.
The principal is the one who has that autonomy.
Does the
Now,
resolution?
we do have the mechanism in place to track. We took away they turned it in, I didn't get it. Or they didn't turn it in, yeah, I did. That part, that's something we could do, we were able to deal with.
Yeah.
That part, yes, we've been able to address that,
Does the resolution get recorded in this same system?
yes.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to move on. If there's no more.
Got one thing real quick. You're spot on with Mr. Darby, with our legislators. We tried to get a change to the absentee last year, and the Commissioner of Education wouldn't hear it. And so we tried last year.
I think it's time that we do need to start talking to our legislatures about the chronic absenteeism, because it is handcuffing our schools in trying to really implement behavior that will bring about change. Now, some people aren't going to like what I'm getting ready to say, but that's okay. That's happened before. But I believe it's time that we put parents more accountable and responsible for some of these behavior problems that are happening with our kids. I'm a parent. I'm very responsible. When my child acts out and the school calls me and tells me that they act out, they're going to get disciplined at home. In fact, I brought my daughter, who's 6 years old, and I did it with my other 3 kids. I made her go to the teacher and apologize for the way that she behaved. I don't know what's happened in the past, but I remember a time when you got in trouble at school, you came home, and your parents knew you were in trouble. You were you were in trouble when you got home. I mean, I come from the time when parents spanked you. I got spankings. That's what they did. And so it is time now that parents also bear the responsibility of the behavior problems as well, as we're trying to bring support for our teachers and administrators who are trying to do a job, and the bus contractors as well, as they're also trying to get kids into the schools, and they're having to deal with behavior problems in the bus as well. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I'm going to move on.
Sorry,
Yes,
one
Mr.
last thing on that, just on the discipline issue, because that's been such a huge issue. I think we're all here in agreement with the chronic absenteeism, so I think that's a good thing maybe we can press harder on. But if we do have bus contractors, and I don't know if we do or don't, but if we do have bus contractors that are turning in discipline issues and the principals are not addressing those,
I'll address it.
that needs to be addressed.
Yep, I'll address it.
I'm going to go on to page 20, section 3.7. This is at the request of several contractors. We've added provision saying prior to the first day of school, the school system would provide a contractor a roster of who we believe the kids will be that will be riding that bus based on the records we have in the school system. It says that we cannot certify that's going to be correct, that if a student is there to be picked up, they still have to pick up that student regardless of whether they're on the roster or not. And it also says the school system cannot guarantee that roster is going to be correct. Because at the beginning of the school year, you don't know really who's going to be going to what school on day one. It's a learning process for the administration to know what children are going to be on those routes. But to the extent that we have a listing of what children is in our system to be on that route, we'll provide a list of that roster to the bus contractor before the first day of school. That's what's done at the request of the school, the bus contractors. So moving on, the next page.
Ms. Madam Maxwell.
Yes, Ms.
Jeff Reed, okay, so with this on the change here, so are we saying that, are we providing them with a roster or we're not providing them?
We would provide them a roster before day one
Okay, good.
of school starting.
To the
That
best
was
of
the-
our knowledge.
That will be the best of our knowledge, and we can't guarantee it's going to be accurate. And the bus contractors and drivers are still obligated to pick up children who are waiting to be picked up, regardless of whether they're on this list or not.
Okay, can there also be added, I know this is, if this is something they're in agreement and modification, so they're gonna get a roster the first day of school. Can they get a roster that's updated after the kids have come in, maybe a month into it? Like 30 days into it, so they can get a better view of who's supposed to be there? So that, yeah, after kindergarten starts, so it'll be like 30 days. Yeah, 30 days after, from day one. I'm sorry? Yeah. Yeah. Right, but not everybody's getting a copy. So this ensures that everybody gets a copy after 30 days. Yeah, so the contract will allow you, will say, will you get in the first day before, and then 30 days you'll get an updated version. It'll include the kindergartners in there as well. So if we can add that language in there to modify it and say,
Madam Chair.
Yes, Ms. Darby.
Mr. Lee, how often are they getting updated rosters now?
It depends on the driver. Some want them, we can get them one anytime they want one.
It may be a good idea to at least put in here that at a minimum, we're updating them every quarter after that initial update after kindergarten starts. I mean, as much as we grow, I can't imagine not having it at least quarterly.
yeah, I just think they should get something updated, in my opinion.
I don't know, you might want to say.
We can run whatever's in the system.
It's only as accurate as what's in the system,
That's
Right.
correct.
which with our growth, it changes daily, hourly.
And, never mind, that's fine. You just tell us when you want it.
Okay.
Okay.
Turning to the next page, this is a big issue as far as the seat rates and mileage rates. So, why don't we skip over this and come back to this last? So we hit the issues. So we'll come back to this. So get the other issues. On page 23, there's a base for the fuel rate adjustment under B2. As you know, several years ago, we implemented a fuel index, because before we had that, we would come back almost every year, sometimes every few months, having to alter what we're paying bus contractors because there being a big jump in prices of diesel and gasoline. So that had been going on for years. Maybe 10 years ago or so, we decided to implement a fuel index that will avoid us having to take that issue up all the time on a recurring basis. And that has worked pretty well. The way that mechanism works in the event, there's a national, for our region, there's a published index of what fuel prices are for diesel and gasoline. And we've used that, and to the extent that shows an increase in the price of diesel and gasoline, we've been paying the contractors and a premium on top of that to compensate them for the fuel costs they've incurred. So that base was $2.60 a gallon for diesel. We're proposing that be updated in this contract to be what current prices are for diesel, to be $4 per gallon for diesel and $3.50 for gasoline. And to the extent this says gone down here in section 3, that if there is a 10% or more increase in that index price, that will trigger the payment of a premium to the bus contractors for excess fuel cost. So if the price, if the base is $4 and diesel went over $4.40 a gallon, then that would trigger this additional money to be paid to contractors, the way this reads right now. That's the way this reads right now. I know it's an increase over 2.66 per gallon, but the board will be making some sort of increase with respect to seat and mileage rates, which should account for some of those differences of fuel costs between the $2.66 and $4 a gallon. So this proposed language that we have in here now is taking today's prices for gasoline and diesel, using that as a base, and saying that in the event the index goes up by more than 10% over that, then the bus contractors get additional compensation for that fuel. And that will be in place for the whole 4 years of the contract. So that's consistent with what we've done previously in the previous contract, just the base numbers are different. We also provided in here that if the price of fuel goes over $6 per gallon, that the board agrees to review the mileage factors here. So if there's some exorbitant increase in fuel prices and it goes over $6 a gallon, then that will come back to the board for you to review the overall compensation package. So if you have to pay more, you can pay more at that point if you deem it necessary. So that's the fuel index provision. Going on to page...
Madam Chair. I'm sorry, Mr. Reed, can I just ask you quickly, on that page 24 under the V where you were talking about the $6,
Yes.
there's two figures scratched out there, the $4 and the $5.50. Do you know which it was previously?
I'd have to go back and look. I can't tell you. I don't know. I'll go back and look.
Okay.
I can go back and look. I can't email you.
If you can let me know, I'd just like to know kind of where we were and where you're looking to get to.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, and then going over to page 26 in subsection D, this is where we talk about the insurance payment. So I call it an insurance fee, and then right now it says $4,000 per bus route. We're changing that language to be per bus, and we have to deal with what we want to do about spare buses. We had that to be paid on or before July 1st, 2025, because the premiums would have to be paid. If you pay for an annual premium, it would have to be paid before July 1 when the contract starts. I understand that some of the bus companies may be offering deals where people can pay for it monthly, but what this provides is that $4,000 fee will be paid before July 1 of each year. I also provided this at the request of several contractors that beginning the third year of the contract, if there's an increase in premiums of more than 30%, the board agrees to relook at what we're paying for insurance. So it doesn't commit the board to paying an additional amount, but says we'll agree to relook at it if there's more than a 30% increase in premiums between the first year and the third year. So that is meant to, if there is some catastrophic event or if for some reason insurance prices go crazy, it does give the contractors a mechanism to come back and have that reviewed by the board. So
Yes, Ms. Rosales?
Sorry, Jeff, question. So what you're saying in this provision is that we are budgeting on our end, really, Dr. Sullivan and Ryan, an increase of premium 30% every year? Is that the cushion?
No. No, what this says is that you get paid $4,000 year one of the contract, you get paid $4,000 a bus year two of the contract. If premiums have increased by more than 30% than what they were at the beginning of this contract, the board agrees to relook at how much we're paying for insurance.
Okay.
Beginning of the third year, so that would only be applicable to the third and fourth year, the way this is written.
So we give them a flat fee of $4,000 if it's whatever it is that's the difference that's on them, right?
Correct.
Okay, that's what I needed to say. But if it's over 30%, then we reevaluate and reassess.
Beginning year three.
Beginning year 3. Okay, got it. Okay, that's all. I just need a clarification, sorry.
Yes, I would just ask that we consider that as we're looking at the raise percentage too, because it's all out of the same bucket.
Okay, thank you.
So we have, is it 320 routes, Trey? I'm sorry, I don't have that number. 320, 330?
I think it's 325 today.
Okay, so you have 320 to 325 is what we think it is today.
332
Okay,
is the
332.
number I have today.
And there'll be additional routes when the school year starts, probably beyond what we have today.
For sure, yes.
So just when you're thinking about numbers, keep in mind that you're paying this $4,000, so you've got about 1.3 million just to pay for this insurance component I have here on the $4,000 per bus. So just keep that in mind when you are considering what all you're doing with respect to compensation. So that's an increased cost that we don't have today. I think Mr. Vaught has rightly asked, well, isn't that a savings from what we're getting from county insurance now? That aren't we paying that same amount to county insurance? And isn't that just one money out of this pot into another pot? I've talked to the county risk department about it. Based on what the insurance companies have told them, it's only $150,000 to $200,000 savings to the school system to not have bus contractors on the county policy. So it's not it's nowhere close to a dollar for dollar exchange. This whole new system is costing the school system over $1 million more for basically the same type of coverage we had before than before. So this will be a new expense.
Thank you, Nashville.
We'll be bearing. So I don't want to eat up all the time we have tonight for the Bus Contractors Association, for other bus contractors to address you. I think the remaining issues, I was trying to see if there are any other major issues back here. I don't know that there are. I did provide that if there are contract grievances with any bus contractor or any issues, before they came to the board, they would go to that TCRB board. So they have some mechanism to get that resolved before it has to come to the board level. And the remaining issue that you have to consider is the fuel. The biggest issue you have is the index, what increase you want to propose for the seat rates and mileage rates. So what the numbers we initially had in here at the suggestion of staff was 5%. I think you've heard the director say you might could do 10% or more, and that's something maybe feasible in the budget to do. Ultimately, it's going to be something you as board members have to decide and determine what you think is appropriate increase. I think the bus contractors asked for 30-something% or more increases, and there's no doubt the cost the bus contractors incur are higher today than what they were 4 years ago. Inflation's been the highest level probably in our lifetimes in the last recent years that we've seen, and so we've had unprecedented inflation for the last few years, and there's no doubt they're paying more for labor, tires, oil, things like that than they were 4 years ago. So it is appropriate to pay them some increase to account for those increased costs that they bear. So ultimately, you have to determine what's appropriate on that.
Mr. Vaught.
I don't know that I've ever asked you this question, but I've been rolling this over in my mind the last 2 or 3 days. You've done more of these contracts probably than anybody in the room, right?
Yes.
Been here longer than me and you, right? I was talking about me and you. Has there ever been, and I know I can remember 2-year contracts, I remember maybe 4-year contracts, 5-year. Has there ever, it's always been a percentage increase. Has there ever been any thought put into using the consumer price index? And do you ever remember that being in a contract?
I'd have to go back and look. Of course, the county has used CPI for things before. That has been used in other county-related contracts before. And if this board wanted to go the route of a CPI-type index adjustment, that's something that could be done. The CPI, Consumer Price Index, is a number published by the U.S. Department of Labor. They have various indexes within the CPI. They have one just specific to the southern region that will be the most applicable, probably our region, as opposed to something applicable to California or New York. So I think you probably would want to use a regional type CPI index that's applicable to our region that takes into account, I don't know if you take into account fuel or not, because you have some indexes that take into account fuel, some that don't. But you're going to have a fuel index regardless that takes care of fuel cost. So the fuel increases will be covered by the fuel index. So if you did want to try to use CPI, that's something that a lot of businesses use because it's hard to predict how much inflation is going to be in the future, and at least there are a group of people who are trying to figure out what what increases are occurring and to reflect that in the consumer price index. So that is something commonly used by businesses to account for increases for inflation. So if you want to go that route, it's something I think an option to look at.
Do you care if I talk just a second about it? The only reason I bring that up is being the last person to the party here, listening to both sides a little bit. The biggest concern, we all as consumers have been through, roughly a 25-30% increase in the last 3 or 4 years. It's hurt everybody. Of course, it's hurt contractors. It's hurt everybody. So what I got to thinking about, instead of us having to deal with it every year or every 2 years or every 3 years, if you base it off that CPI index, then when we go to the commission, hey, this is it. And then us back to our taxpayers or back to the county commission or back to Nashville or whoever, this is a Washington money policy. Right? I mean, they're really, what goes on with monetary policy in Washington is kind of what controls all this a little bit. And so it would take one fear out in the negotiation, because if I'm them, I'm sitting here looking, that's what they've taken a haircut on the last 3 or 4 years. I think it's something we need to look at. I'm not necessarily advocating for it yet, but it may alleviate problems down the road for them, us, commission, taxpayers.
I think it's fair. It's like you say, we want to be fair, and I think the CPI is something it's fair, for everybody concerned.
So to give everybody just a timeline, because I think we'll hear from contractors, just tell you from a district perspective timeline. So of course we have this tonight. April 10th would be a great shot when we would need to know kind of what the board is thinking. That would be ideal. I think it'd be ideal for contractors too. If the board isn't comfortable by that, the very last time would be April 24th. We have to have by statute, no, not statute, our private act, the budget to the county finance director by May 15th. Right now we have, and with your graduation schedule you all have today, we have board meetings scheduled during graduation. So we may have to look at moving some of those times up so that we can be at graduation. So we may look at doing 4. I know that that's not best, so we'll talk about that over the next couple of days, but we have graduation and budget, but we don't have any other time. You guys last year had to meet May 8th, which was Asher's accident day, but you guys had to meet to pass the budget that day, and then you had to come back and meet right after that but to set a revenue change. So county finance asked us to set it as late as possible up to May 15th because they set revenue. Just be prepared for whatever the board decides. You have a placeholder of June 30th. We just have to have a quorum, so we have to have at least 4 board members here on June 30th. Again, I envision us being in fund balance, budgeting into the deficit, regardless of what we decide. If the county commission does not allow us to go into fund balance, we will have to match whatever revenue they allow us to have, and we'll have to cut roughly 8 to 10 million somewhere out of operating costs before June 30th, or county's budget, all of those budgets won't be able to go into play. That's state law. So just as you're looking timeline perspective, I sure hope the county wouldn't do that because we have such a healthy fund balance, and then their budget as well would be tied up. No budgets can pass. Payrolls can't run for us, them, their raises. Nobody's can do it. And so it shouldn't get to that point. You shouldn't get to that point, especially when we have such a healthy fund balance into the 15%. But that's just something that I'm sure as we start talking about our budget process, it's going to get out there. So I don't want y'all to be shocked when you start hearing about that, because it's our first time of operating in a deficit the last couple of years. Do I think we'll actually operate in the deficit? No. We'll budget in the deficit. property tax, sales tax will probably come in that we hope to break even by the end of June of 2026. But that's just the way we're looking at it, so.
We do have a number of contractors here tonight. We have, so I do want to make sure they have an opportunity to speak to the board. We have Tom Russell, who is with the Bus Association. He's the same firm as with Gabriel Ragsdale. He's been here before, but we're glad to have Mr. Russell with us tonight. I think he has some remarks to make, and then we may have other contractors here who have additional remarks as well. So we do want to make sure everyone has a full chance to voice any opinions or comments on the contract tonight.
Absolutely.
So with that, I guess, Mr. Russell, do you want to come forward?
As Mr. Reed said, my name's Tom Russell. I represent the Bus Association, which makes up around 70% of the contractors. Well, I first want to start by thanking y'all. As best I can tell, y'all have been the most active board in doing contract negotiations, holding meetings like this. It's been extraordinarily helpful for us to be able to put our points across and y'all put your points across. And, you know, at the end of the day, what the contractors want, and I know what you guys want, is a contract that everybody may not be happy with, but they can live with. So, you know, we are very willing to keep negotiating. Mr. Reed and I have had several phone calls. We redlined the original contract to make changes and sent that to Mr. Reed. He then incorporated some of those, which he just went through. Didn't incorporate others. I am not going to tonight go through the stuff that he didn't incorporate. I think some of that is stuff that Mr. Reed and I can do, and then also we can't really agree to anything because it is an association, right? And so they have to have votes. And so what they met on last night were a couple of topics, and they were insurance, the compensation, and then the spare bus penalties if, you know, your bus breaks down, somebody's covering your route, the 12 days, and then you start getting the $100 fine, full day, $50 fine for half day. So I wanted to start with insurance first, because the law did change so that the contractors have to provide insurance. But under the law, and it's a statute, it's TCA 49-6-211, the only type of coverage that is allowed, and this was even when you guys were covering the bill for the insurance, which, again, by the way, you're spending more money doing it this way than you were the other way. But I guess I understand the law changed. Under that statute, it says the bus, not students, the bus, must have liability and property insurance in accordance with the regulations of the Tennessee Board of Education. The regulations of the Tennessee Board of Education give minimum limits and also talk about coverage of the bus for property and liability coverage. Right now, under the proposed contract, and Mr. Reed went through this, it's $1 million in liability. The $1 million, what is called general business, which I had to ask what that was, and that's the covering of the students. I don't know why it doesn't say covering of students, but it was called general business, so that's what that is. And then a $2 million umbrella. So what is being asked, and let me back up too, it's not only just the law, it's your all's regulations. 3.400 talks about liability and property. Doesn't say anything about an umbrella, doesn't say anything about covering students. So they're being asked to share a burden that they did not have before. And, you know, I've asked Mr. Reed, I've looked, I can't find anything in the law that says bus contractors, when they changed the law to them having to provide the insurance also has to provide coverage for students. It is my client's feeling that that responsibility remains with the school board. The school board students, whether they're at school, whether they're on the bus. And our folks met last night, and I did want to kind of let you know that what they're proposing is that they would pay for $1 million of liability, right? And of course, we've got this $4,000 stipend. There would still be a stipend that may need to be adjusted because of less insurance, and then they would also want their spare buses covered under that insurance. What is not negotiable to them, and they decided this last night, is if they're going to be required to cover the students, that's probably going to be a deal breaker. And we don't want that. We don't want that at all. But it's asking the association to take on responsibilities that they aren't required under the law to do. And I don't think it's reasonable to argue that if the law doesn't require me to do it, then why should they do it? And if somebody feels strongly enough that, you know, the association needs to cover the students, call your legislature and ask them to propose litigation on, or not litigation, but I'm a litigator, so that's why I said that, but to propose, you know, a statute or, you know, or something on that line. The law already is that the board has to be listed as an additional insured. I've got the statute with me. I don't understand this new statute that's being introduced. I don't know why, because it's just saying what's already in the law. So under this $1 million that they're proposing, the board would also be an additional insured on that. There is a new proposed law that has passed the House, is going to the Senate, so it's not law yet, but it's passed pretty handily and pretty easily, and it's more than likely going to be a law. That's going to give school boards the opportunity, they don't have to do it, but to provide liability insurance of up to $700,000 to bus contractors, and then anything over the 700, so if there was like a $1 million verdict or something like that, or settlement, they would have insurance that would cover that delta. So that is potentially going to be an option that would be before you guys if you wanted to do that. I don't know the bill number on that. I just learned about it actually yesterday. So don't know the details other than what I just said. But again, I don't know if you guys knew that. That might just be an option. Going to the routes and the spare buses, yeah, we agree that there's no requirement that contractors have a spare bus. I mean, you got contractors with 5 buses and you got contractors with 1 bus. So we agree that that's not a requirement. We agree that we need to give you a plan, that if a bus or even a driver goes out of commission, that, okay, if that happens, here's how we're going to cover that. And I think the contract says that you guys would have to approve that. What they're not comfortable with is that, and I understand that this is discretionary, but the 12 days of the calendar year and the 20 days of the calendar year and the fines that go along with that. I get it's discretionary, but again, most of these are probably going to be parts problems. And if you've got an older school bus, that part might not be available anymore. So you're going to have to go to aftermarket. You're going to have to go someplace to find it. And to find that part is completely out of the control of the contractor. That's the mechanic that's going to look, you know, for that part or for that fix. So they, you know, understand maybe there's maybe some delay. You know, from what they've told me, it's minutes, not hours. But so long as they're providing the service that they're required to do, they don't want to be fined for that. The other thing that I did want to cover, and again, and I'm happy to answer, I was not aware Mr. Reed was going to go through every change in the contract tonight. I did take notes, and I am happy to answer any questions that you guys have to the best I can. Do know that we're still negotiating, right? And we're negotiating with y'all, and we want to continue to keep negotiating. It sounds like from some of these deadlines, there's a little bit of runway so we can all get this right, and everybody can move on. And quite frankly, if you get this right, where we're agreed upon some of our changes, this 5 years from now, 4 years from now, you're really not going to have a whole lot to argue about, probably. Because best I can tell, now, dangerous words, right? but coming from a lawyer especially, I understand. But, we are, with y'all's help, making significant changes to this contract. So want to go to the seat rate, student rate compensation. Everybody agrees the 5% is not going to cut it. Right now, that's just a placeholder because it's going to be up to y'all to decide what you think is reasonable. We have said 34.8% with a 10% increase. I've heard tonight that the thought right now seems like it's between a 10 to 12.5% increase. Obviously, that would be something we would need to discuss. I don't know. That's probably still too low. Actually, it's not probably. It is too low. Last time Mr. Ragsdale was here, who's my law partner, he showed you evidence of prices from 2000 and prices of 2025, and it was labor, tires, parts. Those went up between 50 to over 150%. Put inflation on top of that. Over the past 22 years, the average increase to the contractor has been 70 cents per year over 22 years. So they've been operating in the red for a while. And we've looked at everything, and we do believe that the 34.8% is a valid request. Now, if that was approved, going back to the insurance, there would not be any demand for, I call it a stipend, but the $4,000 money that would go towards insurance. They wouldn't have to pay that. If it went below the 34.8, then they would want the stipend, again, I call it a stipend, but the $4,000, money that goes towards insurance to still be part of the contract. There was a lot of discussion about the kind of the penalties of you get a talking to, you get something in your file or whatever. We believe that's overly complicated. It's been brought up that, if you've got a contract and you violate it, you get a talking to, and maybe if you violate it again or a third time or whatever is decided, you're out. And whether that's you're out of route or you're out of contract, you're out. That's what these kinds of contracts are. They're not employees. They're independent contractors. So we would probably want to have some discussions on how that would happen, and that's something that I think Mr. Reed and I could talk about, because he and I have been working very well together. It's been very cordial. He's been great to work with. Then I want to go to the bus capacity of the 70, I think it was 78 bus capacity instead of 90. Here's the problem with that. When everybody's got 90, whether you're in a district that has 90 students that need to get on that bus, or you're in a district that has 60 students that need to get on that bus, you're going to have that route, right? But let's say you have a 78-passenger bus, and they build a new subdivision where you live, and now the 60 students has gone up to 90. So then you're going to have to not only move the 78 bus someplace to accommodate that, you're going to have to ask a 90 bus contractor to then cover a route that might be across the county from where they are. I don't, it makes more sense just to keep it uniform than to introduce the 78 passenger bus and cause the chaos of potentially having to move routes around. When you take that out, you're not moving routes around. So, you know, I know that was one thing that they wanted. Going back to the compensation, you know, the CPI aspect of this is new. And we do want to have discussions about that. It seems to make some sense that you're taking that out, so that's your measurement. But you know, I have not been authorized to make any concessions on that. I know that that was a new thing. I am happy to take any questions, anything that Mr. Reed talked about that I haven't addressed, which was quite a bit. I'm happy to. I took notes. So I will open up the floor to y'all, and if you do have any questions, just let me know.
Anybody have anything? Yes, Mr. Vaught.
One, you hit on something right there that there's a great concern about the spare buses,
Right.
not covering them. How many buses are we talking about? Well, you got 3, but I mean, how many are we talking? Right, you're the 3. You're kind of the backup 3 for several drivers, but I mean, not to put Clarissa, you got a backup, but you have 2 buses. So, if you could come up with a number of buses that we're talking about, are we talking about 10? Are we talking about 100? You see what I'm getting?
You want to know
There's
how many spare buses?
Yeah, because we're talking about $4,000 a bus. If you got a, well, if we could, that's just, okay.
I mean, Mr. Lee, is that something that you could provide?
Yeah, all
Okay.
right. That's just a point of discussion. That's
Sure. No, I think that's
I
valid.
don't want to get in the weeds on something that's not an issue, really.
Yeah, no, but I understand your point.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Sullivan's got something. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Mr. Darby.
I don't know if you'll know the answer to this. I'm not any kind of a tax expert. I'm curious if anybody knows if we were to do the $4,000 stipend, reimbursement, whatever we want to call it, is there a potential for them to not have to pay taxes on that money, depending on how it's phrased within the contract?
That I don't know. You know, I do know one thing is that the $4,000 stipend, the fuel cost that y'all talked about with the $2, I think 66 cents, and the $4 that's being offered, there is some disagreement between the parties on that. What they don't want to have happen is these things, the $4,000, whatever extra on the gas, that's being considered into their raise. The 34.8% is 34.8% on top of the $4,000 insurance and the fuel costs. So they don't want that subtracted from whatever percentage that you guys decide and you think is fair.
Did I misunderstand earlier, though, that you said if they got the 34.8?
They got the 34.
Didn't want the 4 then?
Correct. If they got the 34.8, they don't want the $4,000 stipend.
Okay, so
But if it was below that, they would want the $4,000 stipend for the buses.
well, that was why I was asking, just for when we're looking at all the different options, depending on if the percentage falls below the 34.8, the $4,000 for the board is something to consider, and if they don't have to pay tax on that as well, it's just a little bit of extra benefit. I was just curious if anybody knew. Do you know, Mr. Reed?
That will be paid to them in addition to their compensation. The insurance is going to be expense that they bear they'll show as an expense on their tax return. So you're still getting the money to pay your expense within the taxes you're paying anyway. So in the end, whatever the bottom line is, they will pay taxes on, but they're getting enough money paid to them under the contract to cover the cost that they're incurring for insurance. So they offset each other. So I think it's neutral, or largely neutral, overall from a tax standpoint.
I mean, I do think that is probably taxable. I had not thought about that, but I mean, it is income, so it probably would be taxable. And another point I meant to bring up is, again, under the fuel, not under the insurance of, year 3 and 4, if the insurance premiums have gone up 30%, then there's going to be negotiations. That's a high number. I seriously doubt in 2 years, year 1, year 2, look at year 3, your insurance is going to go up 30% or more. So that would be a number that we would also need to negotiate on, because my clients do believe that 30% is high.
Mr. Vaughn and then Mr. Tidwell.
I guess I'm a new kid on the block, but I've been involved in negotiations. It bothers me a little bit that we got splinter groups involved. Is there any possible way that the negotiations I've all been involved with is the group comes together and gives us some things that they can't live without, and the things they can't live with. And then we'll have to take a look at that and negotiate from there. Is there any possible way, I mean, you talk about you representing 70%. I'm a little bit concerned about the other 30%. They should have a voice too. Is there any way that everybody could come together and give us what you can live with and what you can live without?
I've been asked to represent the bus association. The other contractors are free to, if they believe they need counsel, are free to get counsel. My voice right now, I mean, it's a majority, right? But the other contractors have the right to, they do have the right to speak, they have the right to have concerns. As far as, what the association can live with and not live without, I don't know what contracts y'all have been given. The red line that we sent to Mr. Reed with all the changes we want, I don't know if that was disseminated to you guys or not. I've got a copy with me here if you'd like to see it. But that would be, at least from the association standpoint, you all would be able to see, okay, here's what they're asking, here's what they're not. We think this is reasonable, this is not. I don't know what discussions you all have had as a group to go through the contract and really think about and say, okay, we agree with this or we agree with that. And so if it would be helpful, I can give you guys a copy of that red line. It's going to have some little blurbs on it because when we send it to Reed, there were some areas that we wanted to discuss with him because we were just confused about things. But that would, at least from the association standpoint, would give you what they're wanting, if that would be helpful. But, okay, so you already got that. Okay, great. I can't speak for the other contractors. I'm not their attorney.
Just real quickly, Jeff, you did hear from the other contractors? Yes.
Whenever Mr. Russell finished with his presentation, we do want to make sure we give an opportunity to other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And I want to do that tonight. Mr. Tidwell, did you have something you wanted to add?
Just real quick, I just got a question on the insurance.
Yeah.
We were, from the county's perspective, we were spending less money doing it the old way. But the changes that have been made, if I'm understanding correctly, and I made some notes here, was that including with us covering the students and the umbrella policy, we were still less?
So right now, under this contract, not the one that's being proposed.
Right.
You all are covering that, yes. I think it's either a $5 or $10 million. There's an umbrella portion of it. I think there's a liability portion of it. So under the system that you guys are operating now, and this was confirmed by Mr. Reed, you're saving money as opposed to going to the system that's being proposed. Now, I do understand that the law has changed. But that was just something I wanted to bring to y'all's attention. But yes, to answer your question, everything that's in this the new contract right now was being covered by the board under the current contract. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. Just for clarification, though, so the ask that we were asking of the bus contractors in total, including covering the students and the umbrella policy, total, from what is being asked in the new contract, it was less when the district was covering it from a strictly line item perspective.
Yes.
By how much?
That I don't know. I was just told that a couple of days ago. I don't know. I mean, I don't have access really to your your budget. I mean, Mr. Reed might be able to tell you. Yeah.
The school board didn't pay the insurance. The county does. Well, it was not and that's been the contention all along, not contention. The point that a vast, large majority of people are missing, who pays what for this negotiation is not, your question is the line item that's being paid. The county covered it. We did, it wasn't a line item in our budget.
Okay.
And they're still carrying it, just not for buses.
With
I don't
no
know what their line item
no
is.
extra
I'm going to
revenue
say
coming
it's
to us.
probably the same.
I mean, you guys. So
It's an additional cost to us,
Yeah, that's,
no matter what it is.
that's the question I was circling back around to, is the way it's being managed now is an additional expense to our budget,
Yes,
even though the county previously was carrying.
right.
So that's why I was listening to hear what you were saying, but the way it's being presented now, it's affecting our own budget versus what the county general.
correct. I mean, the county is going to have to carry either county or the board. Obviously, insurance for your students, right? I mean, you have to have somebody slips and falls, or whatever. I do municipal liability. That's what my practice is. So, the county or the board is going to have insurance for that, and that's part of the reason why my clients don't want that part of covering the students to be forced on them just because they're on the bus. And one, and second, there's no law that says that's required. Your own policies don't say that's required. So I just don't, there's no basis for it other than wanting to, pass the buck for no legal reason over to, contractors.
Okay.
So,
Just to clarify again, we are covered by the county policy. So the policy that Rutherford County purchases covers the school system. So that's been a policy that's not been paid for out of our budget. So under this new law, we will have to, how this insurance is going to be reimbursed to the bus contractors will be a new expense to the school system. That has not been in our budget before. And the dollar from a dollar in comparison to how much it's going to cost the school system to do this, it's going to cost us more than what the county had been paying for that equivalent type of coverage. Because the cost savings to the county to not cover the bus contractors has been estimated to be between $150,000 to $200,000 only. It's going to cost us under the $4,000 arrangement maybe $1.3 million to provide this insurance to the bus contractors. So we've got about $1 million additional cost.
All right, so just thinking this out, I'm guessing the county has said that they are not going to participate in this because they have the protection of the law now. So now it goes over to the school system, which is still part of the same taxpayers' money. And instead, we're going to, if I'm understanding this correctly, instead, we're going to pay more money after this law change. For what reason? For not more coverage.
This is a legislative issue with
Is
your
it
legislators.
just- I guess let me clarify my question one last time. Is it just to inflate the school's budget? I mean, because what's the difference? If we're paying more for the same coverage and this coming out of the same taxpayers' money, sorry,
You got
frustrations.
to ask the state.
Yeah, I mean,
They're the ones who made the law.
Right, but they made the law, but still, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Well, we've been here quite a few hours.
Yeah.
So I want to hear from everybody here that needs to speak. And does anyone outside the bus association, would you like to speak? Please come forward. Thank you. Oh, no problem.
Thank you for talking with us, and thank you, Mr. Reed, for meeting with all of us, for the people that's not in the organization. I'm going to make it quick because we all want to go home. In regards to your remark on the fuel, in the contract it said, well, it's not a remark, it's a question. I found your answer. It was, the fuel was, base was 266, 3.964 was the average, and the index was 4. I think that's what you were asking, what we were running before. So now you're wanting to change it, which again is going to save you all money because it's not going to be paid out as much. So when we start implementing, we're going to save a nickel here or a nickel there. That's another save on your part because it's raising to $4. So the fuel right now, it's not at that point. In regards to the fines, I mean, I agree too. Thank you for saying, you said exactly what we said. If you have a problem, first of all, make a procedure. Why does it need to be in the contract that we have fines? We're not employees, we're not children. I know that if you have problems, that's why we have a contract. You do what your contract says, you get these kids to school on time because they cannot get to school late and miss breakfast, lunch, or whatever they're missing. I mean, that's why we have a contract. And if it's just a small amount, why put it in a contract to affect all of us that you're not having a problem with? So we did agree with exactly what you're saying as well, too. And I understand that transportation may have some tied hands, I guess. I don't know how come we can't deal with what a problem is. In regards to the insurance, the question that I had is, if we have an accident and is the insurance on the liability, which it is, I do agree that it does not state that we have to pay for a child. But in regards to what you said, Mr. Reed, or someone else, if there's an accident, is it my liability insurance that is going to cover and like he said, if something happens, you're going to be sued, the county's going to be sued, your driver's going to be sued, if there's a car wash person, whatever's going on, everybody's going to be sued. Is that expected to come out of our liability insurance, or is that the school's liability? So is it taking it all from you? Well, I want to hear it from them, kind of. I mean, that's the question. So is it taking the liability off of you now, off of the county, and putting it solely back on us? Is that the purpose of?
The state statute says, bus contractors are required to carry liability insurance.
Right, but not for.
Which I think that would, and they're adding, I know there's a bill to require that the school system be named as additional insured. So the coverage of that liability would be under your insurance policy is where it would be, to the extent that you have insurance limits. So depending on what your coverage limits are, you would only have coverage up to maybe, under my proposal, $3 million.
Right.
So if there's someone was killed, you're likely to be over $3 million, and that's going to fall on the county still, and the school board still, or the bus contractor individually in that case.
But now that wouldn't be the case. Right now, we're not obligated to, and you did say that there's something in the works. Right now, we're not obligated to cover those children by law. And then that would still, yes, I would have liability for me and my bus and my driver or my employee, but then the student would still be covered under the county's liability insurance.
The statute says that all bus contractors have to have liability insurance. Yeah, I cannot say
Right.
that, the taken interpretation of that statute saying that's not meant to provide insurance for students does not seem to be a reasonable interpretation to me of that statute.
But now the organization, because that may be, I mean, I agree with that, and if you want to step up and say what the law says, I'm not, from what I've interpreted from the law, I do agree on the liability for the bus and for the driver and for my employees. The auto, we've always had the auto liability and liability on the bus. We just never had the liability that covered the students because the liability at the time, even Erie, like what we had discussed before, they will not cover if we cover the students, but they will cover me and my bus and my employees. But if the law hasn't been implemented yet that we cover the students, then why is that being a mandation? Because ultimately, it comes to the money part too. Yes, you're giving $4,000. I don't want to give that up. I want that $4,000. I mean, if you're going to give it to me, I definitely want it. We're in a deficit already. And if you look at the profit and loss, I hope everyone had time to look at this on the email. There was 3 contractors that are multi-bus contractors and 2 contractors that were single operator contractors. The one single operator contractor that asked to be put on this profit and loss form, it's because she had a maintenance and there was no money allotted for her to pay a driver because she's driving her own bus. So whatever she has left over, which at the time she had $600 left over for the month to feed her family, take care of her kids. I don't know, I can't live on $600 a month, and that's all she had. It was either do that, and she still couldn't pay all of her maintenance. She paid half of it, and then left the $600 for her to take care of her family. If you look at the other contractors, they're making $134, one made $400, one went in the hole. I mean, that is minute amount. That's not a profitable business, and that's just for 1 month. Even if they didn't have a lot of maintenance, that doesn't cover the routine maintenance. That was just stuff that come up in 1 month. So, and that was not just not one business, that's over 6 different businesses to get an average. That's an average of what they pay drivers. If they paid a driver, it's an average of fuel. So when you're talking about this, and then you're talking about insurance too, and then especially if you're only talking about a 12.5% increase, which averages out to $896.25, which, again, I sent the percentage rate of what everything is going up in the past year, so 34.9, and then even if you go back to the consumer report that you're talking about, if you look at it online right now, it says that just in December, because I have it pulled up on the transportation part, in December it was a 0.5% increase, which is 269, and then January 1.5, and then another 0.5 for February. So everything is increasing, and we're already in a deficit from the 8 years before from where we've been given minute increases. So it's hard to argue and say by giving us such a small amount of 12.5, $896 is going to compensate on fuel that or maintenance that we're already behind on and labor. But that's what a 12.5, a 15% is $1,000 a month. And then we still have all of this that we're behind on the time. No one expected with COVID for inflation since that inflation has increased, and that is not wasn't expected, but somebody has to eat it. I understand the school board doesn't want to eat it. Contractors, we can't eat it either. You can't run a bus if it's in the red. You know, you have to have money to service it and to keep it going. And that's my spiel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that, okay, real quickly, please.
So liability insurance. Think about your car insurance. You have liability insurance on your car. So if you hit me and it's your fault, your insurance is going to pay for the damage to your car, the property damage, pay the damage to my car, property damage, and then the liability for any injuries that I might have. If you're in your car and there's a passenger and you get into an accident, now that passenger might sue you separately, but normally, if that passenger is injured, liability insurance doesn't cover that passenger. So take that analogy and put it on students. Liability insurance means if the bus hits me, it's going to cover the bus, the driver, and any injuries to me who's the person who has been hit, not the students who are in the car. So I don't know if there's a misunderstanding what liability insurance is, but everybody that has car insurance here and understands that. So I hope that clears that point up, that it's not, this new law of switching the insurance is not switching liability to students. It's just not. Thank you.
I would say, as the director of schools, I'm going to support our board attorney.
Hey, we do have other people here. I don't know if any other bus contractors want to speak. I want to make sure we've given everyone a chance to speak who's here
Everyone had
tonight.
a chance to speak. Okay, Dan, Ms. Darby,
Move to adjourn.
we're adjourned.